The sweat is back. I am your host tonight, Brendan Glasheen. I'll be talking your faces off with some help for the next 60 minutes. There's no Christmas hangover for all of us here at DK Live, at least not anymore. If you don't believe me, well, head on over to the DK Live app where there's tons of fresh content. You can also watch The Sweat there every night at 6 p.m. Eastern. You get even more expert fantasy analysis. You receive play-by-play updates for your lineups during the games, so you don't miss a thing. So just download it and you'll feel better about yourself. All right, so I mentioned there's no Christmas hangover here, but I don't know, it's only Wednesday. It feels like we haven't had football in days, just two. We'll call it an NFL hangover. So despite the games being 2 days ago, we're getting ready for Week 17. Our NFL panel is here, DK Live, Steve Buchanan, Jeff Ulrich, and Reed Fowler. I'm not going to ask any of you how your holiday was because no one cares, and we're getting ready to get lineups ready. So we ask these guys who had big games in Week 17 that they think may regress this week in week number 17. So, Steve, we're going to start off with Nick Foles. He went off against the Texans, throwing for 471 yards, 4 touchdowns. Do you see Foles going off again this week when they face the Redskins, or will he regress?
I mean, talk about nobody cares. I mean, obviously nobody wants to host with you. That's why you're by yourself. I've never seen a sweat show with only one host. So, okay, so let's go to Nick Foles. The obvious answer is, of course he's going to regress. But, let's just not just make this about Foles. You can't expect someone to throw for almost 500 yards and 4 touchdowns in back-to-back games. I don't care who we're talking about. Obviously, we're going to have to see some regressions here this week. But he does have a favorable matchup against the Redskins. They're allowing an average of 22.1 DK fantasy points, 256 passing yards per game. And even though his salary jumped up $1,200 from last week, he's still under $6K. He's only $5,900. And when you look at some of the other salaries that we have this week, Patrick Mahomes, Ben Roethlisberger also are both over the $7K range in terms of salary. So, yeah, sure, Matt, we might see some regression, but the value you're going to get from him and the matchup, it's a pretty good one. So, yes, regression, but, he's in a good spot again.
Jeff, thanks for stopping by tonight. Does Nick Foles regress, or does he keep it going?
I didn't want to say it, but Steve said it. Look, it's 4 guys just getting a little away from their family time, right? It's a stressful time. This is like a stress release for me. It's good. I like this. I like this little hour here. But, I told everyone to play Nick Foles last week. I said it's a crappy Texans secondary. That obviously worked. At the same time, this is like a $1,200 price increase against Washington, who – what does Washington do? They pound Adrian Peterson into the backs of their offensive line like as many times as possible and try and slow games down. This is not the same game environment. It's not even going to be close. I just don't think that the necessary ingredients are going to be there for a big fantasy game from Nick Foles. I love Nick Foles. I think everyone on the program knows that by now, but he's prone to, going from a very efficient, huge output games to 9 DK points. So, I'm not on him on this spot. I think you're going to see quite a big hangover. Not necessarily saying that the Eagles lose, but I don't like him for fantasy this week.
Reed, your thoughts on Foles? Regression, or does he keep it rolling?
Yeah, regression to what he has, like Steve mentioned, right? He's in a decent matchup, but I don't think he needs to do much in this spot. In terms of pace of play, you have Washington and the Eagles, who are bottom third both in terms of speed, and you just think that it's going to be some combination on Philly's side of Sproles and and Adams, and it's paced down, right? And Washington does give up. They're 26 in DVOA to the rush, so they do give up points to the running backs. And this price increase does scare me. I know he's under 6K, like Steve mentioned, but in terms of where they want to go and what they want to do, what they'll be able to do, it's a nice story. We talk about it quite a bit with Washington, that Josh Johnson and Adrian Peterson and Sprinkle and Vernon Davis, whoever these guys are running out there in the starting lineup, it's a pretty nice story, but at the same time, I think that you don't need to roll out Foles. Foles doesn't need to have a big game. I don't think he needs to. So it's going to be the backfield for the Eagles for me. So I'm going to say he does regress, but just to average, which is what I think he is.
Got to play the sprinkler, though, this week, guys. Got to play the sprinkler.
All right, we're off to a fabulous start. Elijah McGuire found the end zone twice for the Jets this past weekend against the Packers. Now McGuire's going to face the Patriots, who still have a lot to play for in Foxborough. Do you expect him to take a step back in this one, Jeff?
Not really, to be honest. You look at Elijah McGuire, obviously, even if I don't really think he's necessarily going to be an elite back or something like that, or like a feature back who's going to put up a ton of yards next year, but he's serviceable. And the main thing is his snaps aren't going anywhere. I mean, he played over 80% of the snaps last week after playing 70% the 2 weeks before. And the matchup, it's pretty good. I mean, yeah, the Patriots were good last week in limiting Josh Allen, but the weeks before that, they allowed a ton of rushing yards. So it's the defense that can be had. He's still pretty affordable at the price tag he's at right now. I mean, $5,300 is not exactly paying up. So is he going to find the end zone twice? Probably not, but the volume might actually be there. He might actually be a little bit more efficient rushing the ball in this matchup. So I think he's still a pretty fine fantasy play.
Reed, are you in on McGuire?
Yeah, I'm in there as well. I don't think he has the same matchup, but I don't think he regresses too much like I think Nick Foles would. But look, Jeff mentioned it, right? New England is a plus matchup, especially for pass catching running backs, 21st per DVOA in that category. But if you look at New England, they're 32nd in stuff rate. Don't get to the running back quite a bit past line of scrimmage, but then the Jets 32nd in adjusted line yards. So this is a bad offensive output in terms of rush and a bad defensive scheme. So I do think they will pass it quite a bit. I think this is a pace-up game. Doesn't hurt McGuire that this is a pace-up game, right? He is that pass-catching back. Trent Cannon doesn't really scare me to vulture any sort of touches. But again, Jeff's right. 2 touchdowns, it's a lot to ask for a guy like Elijah McGuire. I know he saw 80+% of the snaps. Good matchup, but don't think he does the same.
Steve.
The problem with this whole part is that, the Patriots are huge favorites in this game. I think it was like they're 13.5 dogs, the Jets are, I think, for this game. I mean, from a strategy standpoint, usually you don't go out of your way to roster a running back who's whose team is a huge dog. It just really doesn't make a lot of sense, especially when it doesn't get a lot of targets. He's averaging about 4 a game, so he doesn't really get those PPR points either. But like these guys mentioned, the matchup is pretty soft for him. So it's one of those things where if he was a little bit pricier, then I think it would be an automatic no. But he's at that weird price point where, yeah, you could probably still consider it. Even if the Jets are behind, you could still see him getting utilized. He plays on a ton of the snaps like these guys have mentioned too as well. So I don't mind him at this price point. I mean, he's not going to be across the board for me, but he's someone to consider if you need to save some salary or just want to mix up your lineups a little bit. But again, being such a huge dog, that's obviously concerning from a strategy standpoint.
All right, let's go to Giants receiver Sterling Shepard. He had his first double-digit fantasy performance since Week 10 against the Colts this past Sunday. Reed, do you like his chances to keep it up this week against the Cowboys?
Not really. I think this is Sterling Shepard's MO. We've seen it quite a bit. We saw. I mean, obviously, he has one of these games, right, where he's a talented back. His target share does obviously go up with OBJ out, but only about 4%. What scares me and what disturbs me is that he sees 60% of the snaps in the slot when OBJ is in, and then obviously when he's out, he filters those throughout each position. That's where you really want to attack this defense, right? So with OBJ out, not a big change for me. I know he saw a decent line and obviously decent targets, but I just don't like this matchup. This is Sterling Shepard. Like, there's guys in that price range like Adam Humphries who I like a little bit more. Sterling Shepard is going to be a guy like a Robbie Anderson in this middle 5K range that I think going to garner a lot of ownership because of their previous week. And just this spot doesn't really garner a lot of trust me. Look, if Dallas does sit their starters, maybe, right? I mean, maybe you could get number 1s versus number 2s, and that's a favorable matchup. We just don't know yet. We can't believe what Jerry says to be true or not. We just have no idea. So I'm going to stay away from Sterling Shepard, go elsewhere in this 5K range.
Steve, you with Reed?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to know if Shepard did well or not until after the game's over and I look at the box score. I mean, Shepard hasn't done anything to take advantage of the absence of Odell Beckham. I mean, he's averaging over 7 targets a game without Beckham over the last 3 weeks. He's averaging just under 12 DK fantasy points a game in those performances. And that's thanks in part because of the huge performance he had last week. Other than that, he was like 7 DK fantasy points and 9. He's just not doing it at all. Cowboys don't present a really great matchup for him either. Shepard's obviously been their primarily slot receiver. Not a great matchup for him there. So, like Reed mentioned, we don't know who's going to be starting, who's not. You're probably not going to know ahead of time either. So that really doesn't play into anybody's favor. So I'm not even going to bother with Shepard here. He can't do anything even when the opportunity is in front of him. So,
Jeff, you with these guys?
I think he's got a little bit more intrigue than these guys do. I mean, you look at the price range, it really comes down, it comes down to a number of factors that have to break his way. First of all, Odell Beckham has to miss the game. Second of all, the Cowboys do have to rest some of their starters. But again, they're playing for nothing this week, so there's going to be a lot of coach speak, yada, yada. I still don't think you're going to see the starters for the Cowboys play this entire game. And I think someone like Sterling Shepard on the Giants it might be Shepard, it might be Evan Ingram, it might be Saquon Barkley, but someone is really going to benefit in this matchup for the Giants, and it could easily be Shepard. So I'm not writing him off. I definitely think he's going to have some low ownership appeal in GPPs. Everyone's going to go to Robbie Anderson and Adam Humphries for good reason. But look, Shepard is acting as a number one against the backup defense. I'll want to actually a little piece of that. He's boom or bust, as we've seen without Odell in the lineup, but I do think there's enough boom there to consider him.
Moving on in NFL hangover, Kyle Rudolph has been pretty quiet this season, but had a monster game against the Lions on Sunday. He put up 36 DK points, and how about that catch in the end zone? Steve, does Rudolph's nose remain oh so bright and stay hot against the Bears this week?
Oh, my God. When is Emerson back? Oh,
time to go back to the family. This is ridiculous.
Oh, I know. I mean, look, the Bears have been one of the better teams against opposing tight ends on the year. God, that was so bad. I mean, opposing teams are averaging over 10 DK fantasy points a year against him. I mean, the 9 targets he had last week is the most he's seen all season long. It was his first touchdown since week 3. I mean, look, he does get a decent share in the red zone, about 22% targets throughout the team there, but this is someone who just got $1,000 price bump from last week. He's in a matchup a lot worse than he was, so there's no chance I'm taking a chance on Rudolph and your terrible puns.
Jeff, are you still in the spirit for Kyle Rudolph?
What a fantastic troll game by Kyle Rudolph last week. Just fantastic. This guy was going like top 6 tight end in the draft, people talking him up. Does nothing for 15 weeks, literally nothing, and then he catches 9 of 9 targets for 122 yards and 2 touchdowns. Just fantastic. Good job, Kyle Rudolph. No, I don't want any piece of him at $4,400 on DraftKings. This is like a $1,000 price increase, highest price of the year against one of the best defenses in the league. They've only allowed 5 touchdowns to the tight end position. There's not enough upside for me to play him at this price. No.
Reed, you agree with Jeff and Steve?
Yeah, I mean, you can't go to Steve first with that pun. You just can't.
Yeah, I should have thought that through.
Up. But I respect that. I appreciate that. No, look, I agree with these guys. Look, Chicago 3rd versus tight ends, DVOA. They don't give up a ton of points, right, to the tight end. They're number 1 in pass DVOA. What more do you need? Kyle Rudolph is a guy that, I mean, it's a flash in the pan. There's no way. You see that line, you're like, there's got to be a typo somewhere because this guy didn't do anything for, 20-plus games, and all of a sudden he shows up. Not against this team. I think you still need to go to Thielen, Diggs, and Cooks. Obviously, your playmakers there. And the receivers do have some upside. Chicago has been susceptible a little bit. Obviously, Jackson, some of these guys in the secondary are a little banged up. So you might want to attack that. This is a must-win for Minnesota, so I think they're going to go to those guys first as opposed to Kyle Rudolph.
Reed, Jeff, and Steve, join me later on for NFL Price Check. We have a 10-game slate in the NBA to get to this evening. We'll chase or fade next.
Pat Mayo here with an exciting new way to heat up your Sundays this football season. DraftKings has teamed up with Buffalo Wild Wings to bring you a fantasy experience like no other. Blazin' Fantasy Football, a new free game only available inside Buffalo Wild Wings restaurants. Want to win free wings for a year, game tickets, Buffalo Wild Wings gift cards, or Blazin' Rewards points? Here's how. Head to Buffalo Wild Wings, download the Blazin' Rewards app, and join. Already a member? Not a problem. Just log in and fire up the app. Click or tap the Blazin' Fantasy Football icon, join a contest, draft your lineup, and get ready to compete against rivals in all Buffalo Wild Wings restaurants. Blaze your way up the leaderboard by drafting who you think will be the top 8 players, including kickers. Best part? You've got a chance to really rack up the score with your blazing pick. It's worth double points, so choose wisely. Don't just wing it. Draft your team in one of Sunday's 4 contests before each half of the 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. Eastern games. Then, grab some wings, sit back, and watch your team light up the leaderboard. Come back every Sunday for new contests each week. DraftKings and Buffalo Wild Wings, the right stack for Sundays.
The NBA on Christmas Day did not disappoint, but hey, life goes on, and so do contests. DK Live's Mike Barner and DFS expert Jeff Eisenband are here to prep us on tonight's 10-game slate in the association. We're going to chase or fade, guys, which means you can agree or disagree with each of the following predictions. Mike, Kawhi Leonard was one of the league's biggest stars that didn't get to play on Christmas yesterday. So, chase or fade, Leonard puts up the most DK points of all players tonight.
I'll fade that. Leonard certainly has a chance to put up a big game, especially with Kyle Lowry out. But I think Anthony Davis has a more productive night against the Mavericks. The last time he faced them, he scored 59.5 DK fantasy points. So I think he's going to have a bigger game than Leonard.
Jeff.
Yeah, I'm going to fade it. And Kawhi, a lot of Kawhi's success has been due to the injuries in terms of his DFS success. Kyle Lowry isn't playing tonight, but Serge Ibaka is back for the Toronto Raptors. The Heat have been stingy on defense as of late. And Anthony Davis, it doesn't matter who's in his lineup. He's been putting up massive points. So, I mean, he's my pick, Anthony Davis, for most fantasy points.
Interesting. So you both like AD for tonight. Let's go to rookie Luka Doncic. He has been on fire, putting up at least 47 DK points in 4 of his last 5 games. Chase or fade this, Jeff. Doncic puts up 50 DK points tonight against AD and the Pelicans.
Yeah, I'm going to fade it, and that's no disrespect to Luka Doncic. That's just 50 points is a lot. When you look at tonight's slate, the only player that averages 50 points or more is Anthony Davis. So, to bet on someone really superseding their average is too much for me. And the Mavs are on a 6-game losing streak. So I almost feel like something's got to give with those lineups. And we'll also see if Dennis Smith Jr. actually plays tonight for the Mavericks.
Mike, you with Jeff on this one?
I am with Jeff. I'll fade it. It is a favorable matchup. Pelicans play at the 3rd fastest pace in the league, but like Jeff said, 50 DK points is a lot. I think he finishes somewhere in the low to mid 40s.
Interesting. Okay, so here's another one that, guys, get a load of this. Per DK Sportsbook, John Wall expected to lead the league in assists tonight. The line is set at 9.5 Wall helpers this evening. So chase or fade, Wall has at least 10 assists tonight in Detroit against the Pistons, Mike.
I'll chase it. He got off to a slow start in the assist department this year, but he's got at least 10 of them in 5 of his last 8 games. It certainly helps that the Wizards play at the 7th fastest pace in the league. So I do expect him to hit that threshold tonight.
Jeff, how about you?
Yeah, I hate just continuing to agree, but I have this as a chase also. John Wall, before he had flu-like symptoms, he had 4 of 5 games where he had double digits assists. So to me, this is his career average is 9.2. A guy, these guys come in fresh off of Christmas. And for the Wizards, I mean, John Wall has to start making something happen. We're about to hit the second half of the season, and the Wizards are in trouble in terms of making the playoffs.
You guys are getting along too well for this. Let's see if we can get some difference of opinion here. Super low over-under set for a thrilling one. Cavs, Grizzlies, only 196.5 total points. Chase or fade that this game stays under 197. We'll go to Jeff first.
Yeah, maybe this will be a disagreement, and this is kind of because this is one of my principles. I'm going to fade this, and as these are 2 of the lowest scoring teams in the league, but in the modern NBA, I just can't bet on two teams to have an average less of 100 points for a game. I understand these teams don't score. Also, this is a blowout because there might be, the line setters might be banking on the Cavs to struggle. The Grizzlies could easily win in a blowout at home. So I'm fading that. I think it'll be over 197.
Mike.
You called it, Jeff. I'm going to disagree. I'll chase this one. The Cavaliers have already scored fewer than 100 points in 3 of their last 4 games. Playing against the Grizzlies' stingy defense is not going to help that any. These are the bottom 2 teams in the league in pace of play. So I don't expect the Grizzlies to have an offensive explosion either.
Well, hey, maybe the Cavs are upset they aren't playing on Christmas Day again because they were so good without LeBron, right? Maybe not. Last one, the Spurs have... Yeah, there we go, hot take. Last one, the Spurs have been hot. Winners in 7 of their last 9. They're 4-point favorites tonight against the number 1 team in the West, the Denver Nuggets. Chase or fade, San Antonio covers the 4-point spread. We'll go to Mike first.
I'll chase it. The Nuggets are not the same team on the road, especially with all the injuries that they've had. They've lost each of their last 3 games on the road. One of them was by 21 points to the Clippers, and another was an 8-point loss to the Hawks of all teams.
How about you, Jeff?
Yeah, I'll chase it, but I'll say this. Even if it was 4 points, if it was 7, even if it went as high as 7, I'd still probably chase it. I look at what the Spurs are doing. I hate betting against Greg Popovich. And you look at just some of the teams that in this hot streak, they've beat by double-digit points at home. The Lakers, Jazz, Clippers, 76ers, Timberwolves. I mean, right there, everyone should be awake at what the San Antonio Spurs are doing because this is your old-time San Antonio Spurs team, and Greg Popovich has them headed in the right direction.
It's about time this Spurs team got going. We'll talk to Jeff and Mike later on. Those guys will join us to break down a couple of Tears contests and tears of joy. Plus, we've got 2 showdowns in the NBA, Wolves Bulls and then Kings Clippers. We're going to get to all of that. So first, though, we're going to crunch and dissect some football price tags first. This is NFL Price Check, which means our NFL panel returns to us. Jeff Ulrich, Reed Fowler, and Steve Buchanan, all of DK Live. Well, we'll start with Reed since he decided to show his face first, and there are no puns to begin this segment. Tom Brady has been held under 20 DK points in 7 of his last 8, Reed, but yet he still cost $6,000. So is Brady overpriced this week against the Jets?
Yeah, this one's tough. I think he's priced correctly. Obviously, we would want him a little bit cheaper for his performances, right? I mean, he hasn't really shown out, and maybe that injury that he doesn't want to mention is more concerning than we think, and they're just, they want to make sure that he's okay for the playoffs. Having said that, right, the matchup is nice. The Jets are 7th best for opposing quarterbacks, giving up 21 DK fantasy points per game. And what you do like, too, is that Brady should stay upright. Per Football Outsiders, New England has the #1 offensive line, and the Jets, the adjusted sack rate is about 24th in that same category. So you would think that the Jets D-line can't get to Brady. Brady's going to be able to pick apart this team in Foxborough. Like Steve mentioned, these guys are heavy favorites that might garner a little bit more Sony Michel in running the running attack, but I still think he's a good price. GPP is only, though. Cash for me, I would stay away.
Hey, Jeff, is Brady overpriced?
I kind of like Tom Brady this week. And, as far as the injury stuff, I mean, it feels like whenever the Patriots go through a little slump or Brady goes through a slump, he all of a sudden magically gets injured or the media decides he's injured. So I'm not really that worried about it. He's still out there every week. I think Reed actually hit on a lot of the points. I mean, this is just a Jets team that has just been getting worse and worse against the pass all season. I mean, we've seen it the last couple weeks. Kind of came to a head with Aaron Rodgers last week. And the Patriots are pretty good at adapting their game plan to their opponents. I think this is more of like a funnel defense they're going up against that really is attackable versus the pass. So I think a couple touchdown passes here, definitely a higher than normal yardage total for Brady is probably on record. So I think over 20 points, very doable. He's maybe past the days of those like 30 fantasy points games, but a mid-20, low-20 DK fantasy point day would not shock me in the very least.
And Steve, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, his price isn't terrible. I mean, when you look at all the quarterbacks listed here, he's the 11th most expensive. So with pricing in mind there, I wouldn't say he's overly expensive, but the matchup is a good one. I mean, even before we used to target against the Jets, against the pass game, we always would target the Jets for their slot receivers. The slot receivers going against them. That's always been a sign of weakness for them. And that's pretty much Brady's #1 target with Julian Edelman. So, I mean, they've been one of the most generous teams in that aspect. I mean, they're allowing 21.2 DK fantasy points on the year per average, 272 passing yards, over 2 touchdowns a game. So this should be a good spot for him. And like we've all said, he's not overly expensive at $6K, especially when you consider all the other quarterbacks on this slate. So I think it's a great price for him.
On to Seahawks running back Chris Carson. He was one of the best RBs in Week 16. Still pretty cheap this week against the Cardinals. Fan of his price tag of $6,500, Jeff?
I mean, look, if this was week like 14 or something and we're coming into here, I'd love Chris Carson this week. It's a fantastic matchup. The Cardinals can't stop anyone on the ground these days. And the Seahawks are one of the highest, in terms of rushing attempts, one of the top 3 in the league. They love to run the ball. So fantastic spot for Carson. But you have a couple factors going in. It's week 17. Seahawks have absolutely nothing to play for. So even if Pete Carroll comes out and says he wants to play everyone the same, doesn't necessarily means that's going to happen in game. So I don't think you can necessarily trust Chris Carson's workload. You also have Rashad Penny, who apparently is expected back this week. If that rookie's back, I cannot see a scenario where they don't give him a few more touches just to get him going for the playoffs. So and rest Carson. So I don't trust him in this spot. I like it, but I think that for 6,500, you're spending up for a player who the workload is very uncertain.
Steve, thoughts on 6,500 here for Carson?
Jeff nailed it. I mean, Adam Levitan put up an article in the DK Playbook today with teams who are really going to what they need to play for this week. So it kind of helps, how you're going to make your roster this week. And Carson's one of those guys where, it's really tough to figure out what his workload is going to be like. And it's a shame because it's such a good matchup. I mean, we always used to say how many times they've let up over 100 rushing yards. It's easier to say how many times the Cardinals didn't allow over 100 rushing yards per game. And it's only 4 times this season. And Carson's the guy in that backfield. 3 straight weeks, he's had at least 22 rushes. So, I mean, it's such a great spot for him. But I'd like to hear more about what their plan is going into this game. Penny in the background kind of lurking there is a little worrisome if you're going to pay up for Carson. But otherwise, yeah, if this was like week 14, like Jeff said, this would be such a fantastic spot to go for Carson, but the workload is a concern.
Reed, you in agreement?
No, I actually think I like it here. The reason why is Chris Carson. Look, all the points the guys mentioned are absolutely right? We have no idea of figuring out. And Pete Carroll is probably the worst at coaches speak. If you want to talk about guys who you can't trust, it's Jerry Jones. I mean, Pete Carroll's right up there. But Carson sees 53% of the snaps even during week 14 or during week 14, 15, and the weeks that they don't have anything to play for. And I think you're going to want to rest Russ. You're going to want to rest Baldwin and not have them run so much routes. That doesn't necessarily correlate to Carson getting more carries. But at the same time, this guy's seeing, 6 red zone attempts for the last 3 games, right? 63% of those snaps that guy was in, Carson, he was touching the ball. So even if he gets an abbreviated version of what he did last week, I don't think he's going to come out and get 20 to 25 carries. But this guy has shown that he's been effective on 18 to 19 to 20 carries. He's averaging about 4.5, 5 yards per carry. And this is the most run-heavy team. So even if they do have nothing to play for, I still think they run the ball quite a bit against, like Steve mentioned, this Arizona defense who just let C.J. Anderson get 167 yards, right? So, I mean, that just has to tell you that even if he does half of what he did last week, I think he's still in a good spot.
Former homeless person, C.J. Anderson. That's true.
Wow.
Jeez.
Man.
That man's got a family.
Yeah.
I know.
I do too, Steve. Let's go back to that Patriots-Jets game. Robbie Anderson has been a bright spot for the Jets the past 3 weeks, putting up at least 17 DK points in all 3. Steve, Anderson, a steal this week at 5,500 against the Patriots?
I think he's a pretty good fade candidate this week, honestly. I mean, there'll be plenty of buzz going around him, and rightfully so. I mean, this is someone who's averaging 10.3 targets and 24 DK fantasy points over the last 3 weeks. But look, he's going to see Stephon Gilmore in coverage this week. Gilmore has been literally one of the best corners in the league. We want to talk about some of these guys who are shutdown quarters, Patrick Peterson, things like that. Gilmore's name should be in that list after the season he's having. He's only allowing about 47% of the 83 targets against him to be caught. He's only been scored upon 5 times this season. It's going to be a tough matchup for Anderson. And I think a lot of people are going to overlook that, go right back to the well. So I think he's a pretty good fade candidate this week.
Reed.
Yeah, I'm with Steve here. I think the matchup is decent, right? If you just look at the numbers and outside of Stephon Gilmore, who should belong in that category, did really well in the first half of the season. Obviously, faltered a little bit, but against wide receiver ones, New England is 18th per DVOA. This guy has seen 10 targets, and Darnold has come out and said it. Hey, look, if I'm scrambling out of the pocket, I'm looking for Robbie Anderson. Having said that, like Steve mentioned, there's other guys that I like in this range. If once a Robbie Anderson becomes, chalk at 15 to 20% at this price tag, he becomes an easy fade. Sterling Shepard obviously is someone that I'd rather play over Robbie Anderson. In GPPs, obviously Adam Humphries, right, against Atlanta, who's been terrible against the slot receivers. He clearly is Winston's number 1 spot. So if you want to go there, again, he's going to be popular, but not as much as Anderson. So I just don't want to pay up for that ownership price. It's not too bad because of his upside, but ownership is where I would want to fade him.
How about you, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, look, I didn't exactly go so well for me fading Robbie Anderson last week, but you have to realize the spots are fairly different. I mean, he benefited from some in-week injuries last week. Jerry Alexander got hurt really early in that Packers game. Then it went to OT. So Steve mentioned the matchup is pretty terrible if they put Gilmore on him. At the same time, Robbie Anderson is a sub 4.4 guy. He could break through for a couple of long catches, and all of a sudden he hits value again. But I'm on the side of fading him, even though, like I said, didn't work out. I just feel like this matchup, it's worse. I mean, it's on the road, New England, whatever weather, I don't even know yet. But I mean, Gilmore as a matchup, it's just not good. It hasn't been good for basically anyone all season. So I'm not sure why you'd want to go that if he's going to be heavily owned when there should be multiple players in that range that you can swerve off to with similar upside, some similar usage concerns or similar usage upside, I should say. So yeah, I'm on the fade side. Like I said, I do recognize that, if you're fading him, there's a big chance that he gets that one pass again. So
cold is the weather, Jeff. By the way.
Cold. Okay.
Travis.
Sure.
Travis.
I didn't want to say too much. Steve gets mad at me, so
I hope they can play in the cold. They've never done that before.
Okay. Travis Kelce is the most expensive tight end in Week 17 at 7,200. Will Kelce provide a good return on investment against the Raiders, Steve?
You know, it's a bit unfortunate that the Chiefs were in the prime time game last week because Kelsey's had 2 back-to-back like mediocre performances that probably would have helped drive down his salary a little bit, because now he's set up for one of the best matchups he has all season long against the Raiders. I mean, they're allowing an average of 15.3 DK fantasy points to opposing tight ends, 66 receiving yards per game, and this is someone who's averaging just under 10 targets a game. And the Chiefs are looking to lock in that number 1 seed. So if Mahomes is going to be going to somebody who's going to be open and has opportunities, it's going to be Travis Kelce. So this is a fantastic spot for him. Unfortunately, we're still going to pay the price for that. Like I mentioned, I kind of wish he wasn't in prime time, so that price would have went down a little bit. But $7,200, you're going to be paying for that production. But very good chance you're going to get it this week.
Jeff, you in on Kelce?
You know, it's kind of like the last segment where I'd prefer to use Chris Herndon over Robbie Anderson, because I feel like the Patriots will be shifting coverage to Anderson. I just feel like I think it's a better spot for Tyreek Hill than Travis Kelce. And I know some of the numbers aren't going to correlate with that, but what happens when a team gets absolutely smoked by a certain player and then they have to play that team again? Travis Kelce just dismantled the Raiders earlier in the year. And usually when that happens, the team's defense does everything it can to stop that one player from doing the same thing. I think that's going to shift coverage over from Kelce. I think that might open up more opportunities for Hill, who really needs a kind of get back on track game before Casey hits the playoffs. So I think if you're stacking Mahomes, I think Hill is actually the player to take a shot with. And, you know, it's been a little bit boom or bust which guy to pair Mahomes with lately. But if I'm going in this matchup, I'm going to say the Raiders do everything they can to stop Kelce and take Tyreek Hill this week.
All right, Reed, break the tie here.
Yeah, what's Steve here? I mean, I never like to pay up for tight end, obviously. And 7,200, we really have to treat Kelce the same way we have to treat Ertz, kind of like a wide receiver. Obviously, you have to put him in the tight end designation. But at 7,200, the same guys that are around there are Diggs, Thielen, Amari Cooper. So salary-wise, if you're taking away position, Kelce is in the fantastic spot. The Raiders are terrible. They're dead last per DVOA against tight ends. So, you know, he's in a smash spot. Jeff is right, though, that in terms of, right, how are the Raiders going to stop him? They're 21st per DVOA against deep ball. You know, so Tyreek obviously can take the top off of any defense. If you want to essentially pay up for Kelce and just be, you know, leaps and bounds against the field, which I think is going to happen with Kelce against tight ends where other people want to pay down, I'm okay with that. I don't hate it. Ertz obviously is another fantastic spot against Washington where he did well. He saw 13 or double-digit targets, I believe, last week. So there are a lot of guys, obviously, you can play Gerald Everett for GPPs, but Travis Kelce against the Raiders, that's probably the easiest matchup that this guy can get, where it's an easy jump on board and pay for tight end this week.
All right, that does it for NFL Price Check. Thanks, guys. We'll do over-under later on. We're going to jump back into hoops after, speaking of someone who's good with money and investing, Jerry Jones says the Cowboys won't be resting starters this Sunday. For more on that, here's my chat with Nick Eatman of DallasCowboys.com. Let's welcome in Nick Eatman of DallasCowboys.com to give us a scoop on what's going on in Dallas. Don't have to be in Dallas to know the Cowboys clinched the NFC East with the win over the Buccaneers on Sunday. Headed to the playoffs for the second time in the last 3 years. They put up 27 points against the Bucs. It wasn't their best offensive performance. Dak threw for 161 yards. Amari Cooper only had 4 catches. The previous week, as we all know, they were shut out in Indy. So how concerned are you, Nick, about this offense being able to score points in the playoffs?
Well, I think that it is something to be concerned about, and really this has kind of been the MO of this team all year. The defense carried them. They scored 27. 7 of that was a defensive touchdown. Another touchdown came off of a turnover. So their defense has carried them. They're going to have to ask them to do it again.
Sure. Even with the division locked up, Jerry Jones says this team won't be resting the starters. And then head coach Jason Garrett also says if guys are going to be able to play, we're going to play them. Is that the right move?
I think so. And you also got to find some gray area with what he said. I mean, I would think this has a kind of a preseason dress rehearsal type game feel to it, where you practice this week. You want them to keep it going. You don't want them to have any kind of rust. But I think if there's anybody that has injury concerns, I think that you can hold them out.
Whether he plays or not, Ezekiel Elliott appears to have the rushing title locked up for the second time in his first 3 NFL seasons. If not for his suspension last year, he may have made it 3 for 3. He's also become a huge factor in the team's passing offense, 77 receptions for 567 yards, 3 scores through the air as well. Despite only having 6 rushing touchdowns, would you consider this season his most impressive?
Without a doubt, it's been impressive, and I, no disrespect to J.J. Watt or Andrew Luck, but to me, you can't find a better comeback player of the year than Ezekiel Elliott. Now, he's not going to win it because the league votes on that, and the league's the reason why he has to come back, and everyone knows that. But I do believe that he has made a huge turnaround in his life and on the football field as well. I think he's been the head and shoulders like the rock of this team and this offense. It's a credit to him if he does win the rushing title and the offensive line as well. But this is some things that people don't get to see, and a lot of them don't really care about. They want him to play well for their team or their fantasy team or whatever. But what we've been able to see in the locker room, on the team charter, on the buses, a much different person. I hate to call him fully matured at 25 years old, but he's a different person. He's been humbled, and you can see a change this year. I think everyone in this organization is proud of him as a person. And then what he's been able to do as a player is just kind of, the cherry on top.
There's the insight in Dallas that we don't get unless Nick Eatman comes on and joins us here. So Cowboys are locked into the 4 seed. They will likely host the Seahawks, but there is a chance it could be the Vikings or the Eagles. Yeah. What team would this team rather play in the postseason to start things off, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, I certainly don't want to put bulletin board material for anybody, It is my understanding that Philadelphia would not be the 6th seed right now, which I'll say that is probably a good thing for Dallas. And, if the Bears and Vikings have to play, that's where you see some weird things happen in the playoffs when you get divisional games going at it again. And Philadelphia is really, playing at a high level right now. So not to say that the Cowboys are scared of anybody or anything like that, but that would be kind of an interesting thing if they had to face them. And I don't think that it's going to match up that way. Right now, it'll be Minnesota or Seattle, most likely Seattle. You can see some pros and cons for both. I mean, Seattle, they've beaten them earlier this year. Earl Thomas was a huge factor in the game. He won't be playing. They've had some success against Kirk Cousins, as a quarterback, mainly for the Redskins. And so even though things would be different there in Minnesota, you got Mike Zimmer coming back. Got a lot of storylines. I'm not giving you a good answer, probably for a reason, but they both will be challenging. I think they might match up better against Seattle, which is probably the way it's going to be. But, obviously containing that quarterback is going to be a challenge. It's going to be tough either way, but I have a feeling this team won't be very good in a shootout, and Minnesota might be the team to do that more than anyone else, even though Seattle did have 40 points on the Kansas City. So I don't know. Either one, bring them here and let's see what happens.
Sure, and the Vikings with changes now to the coaching staff, who knows if they could score some more points. So
yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough game either way. Nothing's been easy for this team, and so they do play well at home. Dallas does. I mean, they're 7-1 this year at home, and really playing well down the stretch. That place is going to be rocking. So if it's Minnesota, if it's Seattle, it'll definitely be a tough game for sure.
Just as well as anyone, this team has had an up and down season altogether.
Right.
But they've been 6-2 since acquiring Amari Cooper. They're the only team in the NFL not to allow 30 points in a game to the opposition this season. But people will say they won a weak division. So do you think this team has enough to make some real noise beyond that first round in the playoffs?
That's interesting. We kind of had that debate. I think they have the ability to beat anyone. Do they have the ability to rack 3 or 4 of these in a row? We'll see. But when you have something great like a defense, you at least have a fighting chance.
All right, thanks to Nick for taking some time, as always, with us on The Sweat. Let's welcome back our NBA panel, Mike Barner and Jeff Eisenband. The Hoop Heads, back from yelling and crying in their pillows. No, just kidding, guys. These guys are crying their picks for NBA tears of joy. Mike and Jeff, tell us, I know, I'm full of bad puns tonight, I know. Mike and Jeff are going to tell us who they like most in each NBA tier. It's a long way of saying it. Mike, tier 1 has 6 names to choose from. I'll start with Leonard, and that's a big one because Kawhi is not going to have Kyle Lowry tonight. You guys brought that up earlier. Jokic, Drummond, Towns, Drew Holiday, Oladipo. Who do you like from this group?
Yeah, Towns is going to destroy the Bulls tonight. The Bulls are terrible at defending opposing centers. The first time they played them this year, Towns scored 35 points and had 23 rebounds. So he stands out to me as by far the person I'd go with in Tier 1.
Huh, perhaps a little foreshadowing for the showdown discussion for later on. Jeff, who do you like in Tier 1?
Well, I like Andre Drummond, and part of that is because the Washington Wizards are absolutely abysmal on the boards. While the Wizards are 29th in both their own rebounding and opposing rebounding, so he's going to be going up against Thomas Bryant and Jan Mahimi down low, maybe some Markieff Morris. I like Andre Drummond there, but of course, if you want the safe pick, it's Kawhi Leonard.
Okay, let's go to Tier 2. It's made up of 7 players. You got Kemba, DeRozan, Tobias Harris, De'Aaron Fox, Luka Doncic, Julius Randle, Miles Turner. Who's your pick here? Jeff, we'll go to you.
I've tried to fight it, and I'll probably end up, I feel like, agreeing here, but Luka Doncic, just the way, and I know we talked about him not getting to 50 in the first segment, but I mean, the Mavs let him do everything out there. And to me, he's the most sure pick out of these guys that include a lot of superstars, but you know Doncic is going to get his shots. You know he's going to have the ball in his hands, so I take Luka Doncic. Mike, how about you, Doncic or somebody else?
I'll actually go with Fox. He scored at least 40 DraftKings points in 5 of his last 6 games. The Clippers allow the 6th most DraftKings points per game to opposing point guards. Both teams are in the top 9 in pace of play, so he should have plenty of opportunities to be productive.
All right, we're going to go now from tiers 3 through 6. We'll just get a name from each. So, player of your liking in tier 3, Mike.
I really don't like the options, especially with Lowry out. And now it seems like Zach LaVine's coming back tonight. But I guess I'll go with Lowry Markkanen. He's been their leader with LaVine out. He's got at least 41.8 DK points in 4 of his last 5 games. LaVine probably won't see his normal allotment of playing time today. They had said earlier that if he returns today, he'd probably come off the bench. So I'll stick with Markkanen.
Jeff, someone from tier 3.
D'Angelo Russell. Again, not a great group, but he's got the most upside, so I'll roll the dice on him.
All right, Jeff, back to you. Let's stay with you here. Who's the best option in tier number 4?
Total a sleeper fantasy pick, daily fantasy pick this year. Danilo Gallinari, he has 32 plus points in each of his last 5 games. DFS points. Don't sleep on Gallo from 3 and also rebounding.
All right, and Mike, someone from tier 4.
I will stick with this game between the Clippers and the Kings. It seems to be a very fantasy-friendly contest. I'll go with Buddy Hield. He's been red hot offensively, which has helped him score at least 31 points in 6 of the last 7 games.
All right, gents, start cramming your showdown info because we'll get your picks later on. Again, those contests have the Wolves and Bulls and then Clippers and Kings. NFL over-under is coming up next on The Sweat.
Get ready to enter the Decagon. DraftKings and the Professional Fighters League have partnered to bring you closer to the action than ever before. Introducing the PFL 2018 World Championship Pick'em game. On New Year's Eve, the PFL makes history. 12 fighters will enter the cage to do battle for 6 championship titles. You get the shot to come out swinging and compete for your share of $25,000. Here's how. First, pick your fighters. Select who you think is the best shot to win each of the championship fights. Then, decide on the outcome. Will it be a knockout, submission, or will the decision be left up to the judges? Each fight is scheduled for 5 5-minute rounds of action, and you must identify which round the fight will end or if it goes the distance. The only scale you'll have to weigh in on is this one, the sliding scale, where you select the exact time in the round the fight will conclude. All selections must be made before you can advance to the next clash. Do this for each of the 6 championship matches and get ready to rack up the points. They're rewarded based on how many selections you got right. So choose wisely and knock out 2018 in style. Join the Professional Fighters League and take down the competition to win your share of $25,000. And don't forget to watch PFL 2018 World Championships live on the NBC Sports Network from 7 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time on New Year's Eve, Monday, December 31st.
Welcome back into the sweat. Brendan Glasheen here, rejoined by DK Live, Steve Buchanan, Jeff Ulrich, and Reed Fowler. This crew is back to play NFL over-under. Guys, want to start Browns-Ravens. That one is in Baltimore. If the Ravens win, they're locked into that number 4 seed, but we know the Browns won't let them do it easily. Line is set for 40.5 points for that game. Taking the over or the under, Steve?
I was honestly staring at my ceiling thinking about this for a few minutes. Like, I can't decide on this one. So I'm just going to stick with the under on this one. I mean, any game with the Ravens defense, I think you have to think about the under in this game here. They really, honestly, have one of the best defenses in the league. And look, the Browns have been fine offensively, but one of the Ravens' best part of their defense is their run, and that's been a pivotal part of the Browns' game. I can't really see them getting an efficient run game going against this Baltimore defense. So I think this one goes under, but like in the grand scheme of things, like I feel like this is just such a perfect number. 40.5 just feels like a just right number here, but to be safe, I'm going to take the under on this one.
Staring at your ceiling sounds like a Christmas Vacation reference. I don't know if that's what you were going for. Jeff, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the other factor there in the under is that, the Browns defense is pretty good. So, I mean, I think that I'll take the under here too. I mean, if forced to choose, it's probably not the favorite way to attack this game. I think I'd rather just take the Browns and the points and see if we can watch Baker, pull off the upset and knock the Ravens out. That's what I'm looking forward to this game. But I would still say the under. I mean, the Ravens have been really tough against teams at home lately. And I feel like one of these teams is probably going to have trouble getting past 13 points, and it might be like a 20-13, 23-13 game. So I would definitely side with the under if forced to go on the total.
If only Hugh Jackson was on the Ravens coaching staff. Reed, how about you? You in agreement?
No, I'm not. I'm going to take the other side. I'm going to take the over. Look, both of these teams, right? Baltimore, 22 points averaging in the last 3 games. Cleveland, around that same, right? I think when the Baltimore games that have hit the under quite a bit, actually, it's because the other teams, like Steve was mentioning, the Baltimore defense, really good. Cleveland is, firing. If they win this, I mean, this is going to be a first for the win percentage, obviously being above 500 in quite some time. I think Baker has this team doing things that they obviously didn't think they could do. Both teams up pace, right? So they play at a really fast pace, both top 10. So I'm going to take the over on this one.
All right, next one. Vikings are battling for the 6th seed in the NFC. They'll host their division champion, Chicago Bears. Will this game go over or under? Same line, 40.5 points, Jeff.
I like the over in this one. I mean, you get a nice cozy dome in terms of Vikings. They're playing Minnesota this week. And both these teams have pretty efficient offenses when they get going, right? I mean, it was 25-20 in their first meeting. The Bears are still 9th in terms of points scored. The Vikings offense has looked a little bit better the last couple of weeks. So I know the defenses have played well too. I know Minnesota's defense has played well at home lately, especially, but both of these defenses have scoring potential. So even if one side, has trouble scoring, I mean, that the other defense could easily put up a score, and then you have like a 30-13 game, and you hit the over that way. So I like the style of these two teams for a low point total like that. I'd much rather take the over in this spot.
Reed, over under.
I'm going to take the under on this one. Minnesota, 5 of last 6. They've hit the under. And a big reason, I think, for that is because Zimmer and these guys, they want to run the ball. That's why we've seen Dalvin Cook, again, in plus matchups, obviously exploit those. They run the 6th most run plays over the last 3 games. I really do think that Minnesota does still have to pass, right, to Jeff's point. I think if they want to win this, and they want to make it to the playoffs and obviously, better their chances, they're going to have to rely on their playmakers. But I still think that funnels through Cook. I still think you want to run the ball first. Even though, like I mentioned earlier, that they are susceptible, the Bears defense is to the pass, obviously, with some injuries, I still think this runs through Cook, and I think this is a little bit slower paced than what we think. So I'm going to say under.
Steve, this one's indoors. No worries about the cold.
Oh, yeah. Thank goodness for that, Jeff. I'm having a hard time seeing the over for this one. I mean, when you look at what both of these teams have held opposing teams to over the last 3 games, Vikings allowing an average of 15.7 points, Bears 10.7. So, I mean, it's not like these defenses are really letting anything through at this point. So it's hard to think that they're going to break, both these defenses are going to break a score of over 40.5. And like Reed mentioned, they're feeding Dalvin Cook a lot more. I hate to break it, but that's not how you're going to beat the Bears. The Bears are so good against the run. So if that's their game plan to go with Cook, you're not going to be getting any points really in this game here. So I just don't see where the offense is going to come from on both sides to get the over in this game. So I think this is an easy under.
I don't know. I feel like this total is an overreaction to just the last few weeks for these teams because they're both top top half offenses in the league. So I was a little surprised to see it this low, but yeah.
Yep. I wasn't asking for an explanation.
The Philadelphia Eagles
buddy.
are
That's your Christmas
also
present.
battling for that final playoff spot in the NFC. Bird Gang at the Redskins. Line here is set at 42. Reed, you see this one going over or under?
Yeah, Jeff's in the giving spirit. I believe it's Boxing Day, right, Jeff, that we get over there. So, no, I'm going to say under here. This smells like an under, right? Both teams, obviously Washington, 5th in run play percentage over the last 3. Even when they're trailing, they're 22nd per Football Outsiders of pace of play. So, again, like I mentioned earlier, to Steve's point on that last question, where is this offense really going to come from? Both teams are running the ball. I think it's going to be more Adams and more Sproles in that sense. Again, Foles is a nice story, but I think this is going to be under.
Steve?
Yeah, kind of what Reed was saying here. I mean, I don't know where the offense is going to come from. I mean, even with how bad the Eagles secondary is, I mean, who are the Redskins going to throw to here in this spot? I mean, they're averaging just 16 points per game over the last 3 games. Look, Josh Johnson is a poor man's Lamar Jackson. He has about a quarter of the upside compared to Jackson here. We haven't seen him generate more than a score in any of the 3 games that he's been involved in. I mean, certainly the defense is, the Eagles, the defense is that's one you want to face because of how poor they are. But, what's Jamison Crowder going to break the slate? I don't think so. So it's just, it's hard to see this one going over again. There's a lot of unders this week, I feel like. This is going to be a low-scoring week.
All right, Jeff, in agreement.
Yeah, I'll agree with them on this one. I mean, I just said in the last 5 games for the Eagles, this is the only time they went under 42 is when they played the Redskins. They combined for 41 points, and it was a similar. I just expect a very similar game. I mean, Washington put up 13 points there, and even if I'm right, Nick Foles doesn't come up through with like a huge game, and he's probably still going to put up 20 points, right? So it's hard for me to rely on Josh Johnson taking advantage of a weaker Eagles secondary. I just feel like the way things have gone, best case scenario, you get like a 20-23 game and sneak the over. I think the under is just so much more likely in this game.
We'll do one more. The Chiefs still need to hold off the Patriots and win this week if they want that top seed in the AFC. They'll face the Raiders with an over-under set at 53.5. Are you taking the over or the under, Steve?
I think this one's got to be over here. I mean, the Chiefs are looking to get that number 1 seed. They're going to do as much as they can to get there. Mahomes is 2 touchdowns away from 50. I think they'd like to get him there too as well. What are you shaking your head about, Reed? You don't agree with that?
No, that's crazy. I'm saying that's amazing. I'm not disagreeing with you, Steve. I think that getting to 50 for this guy wasn't supposed to happen. So
what eggnog did you drink today, Steve?
I'm shaking my head in agreement. Jeez.
I'm still in the holiday spirit. Look, I got good shirt, So I mean,
I tried from the start of the show to be in the spirit, but I got turned down.
I think this one quiet. I think this one definitely goes over though. There's a lot of factors in this game. The Chiefs want that number 1 seed. They still have a terrible defense, though. So even though Oakland has been so poor on offense, they can still score.
Jeff?
I don't really want to touch this because I just don't know what Oakland is going to do. I'm going to take the under here for the simple fact is I feel like Oakland had their Super Bowl last week. They closed out Oakland Stadium. They beat a division rival in a game they were underdogs. Now what? They have to travel to the Midwest and take on KC and an angry KC offense who probably wants to get back on track. Yeah, the Chiefs are probably going to put up 40 points, but I just don't see the motivation for John Gruden to get his team pumped up to get another win and get them a worse draft pick. Like, it just doesn't make sense. I'm thinking like a 35-10 game here makes a lot of sense. I just don't want to rely on Oakland to put up points. So I side with the under in this spot.
And Reed.
Yeah, I was going to disagree with Steve. No, I agree with Steve. I mean, both these teams, like Jeff does make a compelling point where Oakland doesn't really have really much to play for other than auditioning to maybe other cities to find a home field advantage wherever that may be next year. But both of these teams are bottom third in DVOA. The pace of play, look, Oakland has shown some aptitude on offense, obviously with Doug Martin maybe having his best game ever right last week. I still think Jared Cook is a spot that you can, and even Derek Carr are some spots you can exploit. Wouldn't be surprised if this is the under, but I think both of these defenses are bad, so I'm going to take the over and agree with Steve here.
Steve, this is it for me this week, so take care.
I expected that.
Maybe
one time a week.
Maybe I'm kidding. Jeff, Reed, Steve, thanks a lot. We'll talk to you guys later. All right, finally, we're getting into tonight's NBA Showdown contest. There are 2. Welcome back, DK Live's Mike Barner and DFS expert Jeff Eisenband. We're going to start with Mike here. Guys, let's discuss Timberwolves Bulls first. Mike, who are you playing at captain in this one?
This one's still a little hard to predict with Derrick Rose listed as questionable. Towns definitely has the highest upside, but putting him in the captain spot really hamstrings the rest of your entry. If Rose plays, he's a great candidate, especially with this game being played in his hometown of Chicago. If he doesn't, it might be worth taking a chance on someone like Robert Covington. He has a high minutes floor, and he gets a big boost from his value on the defensive stats as well.
So if Rose is a go, you're in on playing Rose at captain?
Yes.
You are. All right.
Yes.
Jeff, how about yourself?
I mean, I'm a big guy in showdowns. If you're going to take a captain, if you're going to play a captain, play the best player on the floor. So I would play Karl Towns and then try to jostle your roster to make it work other than him.
Derrick Rose having potential to be a captain. I'm still trying to let that one sink in. Hey, Jeff, Bobby Portis and Jeff Teague are both out for tonight. So where can users find some value in guys that are going to be filling in their roles in this game?
Well, we'll continue with the Derrick Rose conversation. I mean, with Jeff Teague out, Derrick Rose in his hometown of Chicago, I think I just saw a tweet. He's already bought 60 tickets for tonight's game. So nice. Derrick Rose is playing. I'm not reporting that officially, but I think Derrick Rose is in. I think he takes those Jeff Teague points and eats them up. And then the other side, Wendell Carter, even though he's been playing the whole season, he's been starting. I like without Bobby Portis. I think that they congest each other on the court together, but I think this opens things up a little for Wendell Carter.
So, Mike, you went as far as to say that Rose would be a good captain slot guy. Give us an option for each team and maybe not use Rose again because you've already given us a sense of how you feel about him. Give us one guy from each team for some value.
Sure. So I'll give you the other end in case Rose doesn't play, so you're covered on both sides. If he doesn't play, Tyus Jones becomes a great option. Also, Jared Bayless at 2,200, he becomes someone to maybe take a chance on. For the Bulls side, they don't seem to want to play Jabari Parker anymore. That ended quickly. So Robin Lopez might actually be one of their bigs off the bench to consider. His upside isn't great, but he's got at least 15.3 DK points in 4 of his last 6 games, and he's only priced at 2,400.
Guys, let's move on to Kings and Clippers. Mike, who do you have in your captain slot for this one?
Again, I'll go a little off the beaten path. I actually like Bogdan Bogdanovic in the captain spot. He's had a couple of rough performances lately, but he's still averaging 30 DK points across his last 13 games. He scored 41 DK points the last time these two teams played. If you slot him in there, you can fit in De'Aaron Fox, Montrezl Harrell, and Tobias Harris all alongside with him without having to go with a complete dart throw at one of the other spots too.
How about you, Jeff?
I go best player, and in my mind, that's Tobias Harris tonight. I think don't get fooled by De'Aaron Fox. I know that Mike mentioned kind of what the Clippers give up to point guards, but with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Patrick Beverley on the other side, I have trouble betting on point guards in this case. But I will throw out that Danilo Gallinari and Buddy Hield, who Mike mentioned before, I mean, you're not going to go wrong with those are 2 fantasy sleepers right there.
Yeah, Mike, you were a big fan of Gallinari earlier in the Tiers game, who's a cheaper player that people can find value for in said player for this showdown.
Well, he's certainly not an exciting option, but Iman Shumpert at only 3,800, he opens up a lot of opportunities from your budget. His upside isn't all that high. He continues to maintain a starting role, though, and that's helped him score at least 17 DK points in 4 of his last 5 games.
Jeff?
I'm looking at Marcin Gortat at 5,100, and maybe I'm the Grinch, but Boban, who had such a strong start to the season, has started to trail off a bit and I think come back to reality. So I see guys like Marcin Gortat and Montrezl Harrell getting more minutes for the Clippers.
Guys, the Kings and Clippers have the highest projected total on DK's Sportsbook tonight at 237.5. I mean, that is something here. Do either of you see that game having that many points? Mike, you first, then we'll go to Jeff.
Yeah, I do. The last time they met, they scored a combined 254 points. Both these teams play at a fast pace. They've got a lot of offensive weapons. So, yeah, I think they can hit it.
And Jeff?
Yeah, they're the 3rd and 5th highest scoring teams in the league. The Clippers average the exact same amount of points as the Golden State Warriors right now. These teams don't like to play a lot of defense. They both want to win this game. I see this going high.
All right, let's do this. Before we say goodnight, we'll do Jeff first and then Mike. Jeff, give me a lock for the showdowns tonight, your showdown lock over the 2 contests.
Okay. Oh, well, the showdown slightly throws it off, but I'll go back to my guy, Danilo Gallinari, who I brought up before. Again, a sleeper pick who's just been on fire fantasy-wise.
Jeff, in your lock for the 10-game slate.
My lock for the 10-game straight is Andre Drummond. As we said, the Wizards have absolutely no front line. I see Drummond getting. I would almost put my money on an 18 rebound over under for Andre Drummond tonight.
Mike, your lock for the showdowns, and then your lock for the 10-game slate.
I can make it easy for both the showdowns and the 10-game. I'm going with Towns. The Bulls are actually a better team at home, which should help keep this game fairly close. So Towns gets plenty of playing time. I'm not worried about his price. I'll make everybody else fit in around him.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody. The Sweat comes back at you tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern. Check it out, DK Live app.